Howdy shipmates, Captain Dan here. Welcome to Story Time with Captain Dan. Here sharing tales old and new to help bring some cheer during this time of social isolation. I'm sharing some classic stories and some new stories and special requests, any shout outs to any friends or anybody that wants cheering up during this difficult time. And today I'm sharing another classic story from the Ladybird collection. And this is a favourite for pantomime season, this one. It's the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Anybody know that? So this is a special kind of pantomime classic. I thought I'd dedicate this one to all my friends at Duckingfield Old Chapel. Particularly Kevin and Bronwyn, who I know have been quite poorly recently. I hope you're feeling much better. So much love especially to Kevin and Bronwyn, but all my friends at Duckingfield. This is the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. And it begins as all good stories should begin. Once upon a time there was a widow who had a lazy son called Jack. They lived together in a tiny cottage. Jack and his mother were very, very poor, and as time went on they became poorer and poorer while Jack grew lazier and lazier. Soon Jack and his mother were so poor that all they had left in the whole world was one cow. Alas, the day arrived when Jack's mother said, "Tomorrow you must take our cow to market and sell her. She's all that we have left in the world, so be sure that you get a good price for her." Here you can see Jack pondering at the window. So the next day Jack set off for market. On the road he met a butcher who asked him where he was going with his cow. When Jack told him, the butcher said, "I will exchange these beans for your cow." He showed Jack some strange looking beans, all of different colours. "I'd be a fool to exchange my cow for your beans," said Jack. "Ah, but these are not ordinary beans," replied the butcher. "They are magic beans." Well, Jack thought what a fine thing it would be to have some magic beans, so he gave the cow to the butcher, put the beans in his pocket and set off for home. "Look, mother," cried Jack, "I've exchanged our cow for these magic beans." Well, his mother was very, very angry. "You silly boy! Now we shall surely starve." In her anger, she threw the beans out of the window and sent Jack upstairs to bed without any supper. Poor Jack, poor Jack. The next morning when Jack woke up, his room was much darker than usual. When he looked out of the window, he saw that a huge beanstalk had sprung up during the night from the magic beans that his mother had thrown out of the window. Jack ran outside and immediately began to climb the beanstalk. You can see it there. He climbed and climbed, but whenever he looked up, the top of the beanstalk still stretched upwards and upwards, out of sight. After many hours of climbing, Jack reached the top of the beanstalk and stepped off into a wild, bare country. A long road led away into the distance. Jack set off along the long road, and soon he met a very old woman. "Good morning, Jack," she said. Jack was amazed that the woman knew his name. "I know all about you," she said. "This land belongs to a wicked giant. When you were a baby, the giant stole all your father's belongings. That's why your mother is now so poor." You must try to get your father's wealth back, she continued. If you are brave, I will try to help you. At that, the old woman disappeared and Jack went forward along the long, lonely road. Toward evening, Jack came to a castle. He knocked on the great door and a woman opened it. I'm tired and hungry, said Jack. Please, can you give me some supper and a bed for the night? Oh, my poor boy, cried the woman. My husband is a giant and he eats people. He would be sure to find you and eat you for his supper. Jack felt afraid when he heard this, but he was too tired and hungry to go take another step. So he pleaded with the woman to please take me in. At last the giant's wife agreed and she led Jack into the kitchen. Then she set a fine supper for him. Scarce had he finished eating when the ground was shaken by heavy stamping feet. 3 loud knocks were heard on the door. It was the giant returning home. Jack's heart began to thump. The giant's wife began to shake. She grabbed Jack and pushed him into the oven, which fortunately was cold. She then went to let her husband in. You can see her there, look. The giant stomped into the kitchen, sniffed around, and roared, Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. Oh, nonsense, said the giant's wife. You're dreaming. And she set an enormous meal on the table before him. As the giant was hungry, he sniffed no more, but sat down to eat. Jack peeped at the giant through a crack in the oven door. You can see him there. He was astonished to see how much the giant ate. When the giant had finished his meal, he shouted to his wife, Bring me my hen! His wife brought the hen, and he went off to bed. Lay! Shouted the giant, whereupon the hen laid a golden egg. Another! Roared the giant, and the hen laid another. Again and again, in a voice of thunder, the giant shouted, Lay! Soon there were 12 golden eggs on the table. Then the giant fell asleep in his chair, and he snored so loudly that the castle shook. Well, as soon as Jack heard the snores of the giant, he crept out of the oven, seized the hen, and tiptoed out of the castle. Then he set off running along the road as fast as he could. On and on he ran until at last he came to the top of the beanstalk. He climbed down quickly, took the wonderful hen to his poor mother. When Jack set the hen on the table and ordered it to lay golden eggs, Jack's mother could not believe her eyes. Now our worries are over, she said. But after a while, Jack longed for another adventure. He was determined to visit the giant's castle again. He disguised himself so that the giant's wife would not know him. Just as before, Jack climbed the beanstalk and reached the castle towards evening. When the giant's wife opened the door, he said, I'm hungry and tired. Can I stay for the night? You cannot stay here, replied the giant's wife. The last spy I took in stole my husband's hen. But Jack chatted so pleasantly that eventually the giant's wife let him in. After Jack had eaten a good supper, the giant's wife hid him in a cupboard. No sooner had she done so than in stomped the giant, roaring again. Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Nonsense," said the giant's wife. "You are dreaming." And she set an enormous supper before him, and there you can see the supper and Jack there peering through the gap. After supper the giant roared, "Fetch me my money bags." His wife brought the bags and went off to bed. The giant emptied all the money onto the table and counted it over and over again before putting it back into the bags. Then he fell asleep. You can see him there. As soon as Jack heard the giant's snores, he crept out of the cupboard and picked up the heavy money bags. He managed to sling them over his shoulder. Then he let himself out of the castle as quietly as possible. Jack could not run along the road because the money bags were so heavy, but he reached the top of the beanstalk safely. Jack's mother was overjoyed to see him, and when he emptied the money bags on the table, she was astonished. With the money they built a bigger house and bought furniture, new clothes and food. Jack and his mother were very contented. But soon Jack began to long for more adventure. He was determined to visit the giant's castle once more. This time Jack used a different disguise. Once again Jack climbed the beanstalk, followed the same path, arrived at the castle door. The giant's wife did not recognise him and he begged for a night's lodging. "No, no," she cried. "You cannot come in here. The last 2 boys that I took in were thieves. No, no, you cannot come in." Jack begged and begged, and at last the giant's wife took pity on him, let him in and gave him some supper. Then she hid him in the wash basket in the corner. There you can see. Well, soon the giant came home and he roared, "Fee, fi, fo, fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Ah, nonsense," said the giant's wife. "You're dreaming again." And she set him an enormous supper before him. After supper the giant shouted, "Bring me my harp." The giant's wife brought a beautiful golden harp and set it on the table before him. Then she went off to bed. "Play!" roared the giant, and the harp began to play of its own accord. Jack had never heard such a sweet, sweet music. The harp continued to play until the giant was almost asleep. Then he shouted, "Stop!" and the music stopped. As soon as Jack heard the loud snores of the giant, use your imagination there. Okay. As soon as he heard the snores, he jumped out of the corner and seized the harp, but the harp called out, "Master, master, master, master!" The giant woke up in a fury. "You are the boy who stole my hen and my money bags!" he bellowed. Then he staggered to his feet and set off after Jack. Jack was terrified. He ran for his life towards the beanstalk. Looking over his shoulder, Jack saw the giant striding after him. Then he ran as fast as he could ever run before, just to save his life. Jack reached the top of the beanstalk safely, but the giant was close behind. He scrambled and slid down the beanstalk, shouting, "Mother, mother, bring me the axe quickly! The giant is coming!" Then Jack's mother brought the son the axe. Could see the giant climbing down rapidly down the beanstalk. Jack swung the axe with all his strength. With one mighty blow at the beanstalk toppled down, and there was a tremendous thud as the giant was thrown headlong to the ground. The giant fell dead in Jack's garden. He was so big that he filled it end to end. Pointing at the giant, Jack said to his mother, "He robbed us of all our wealth." At that moment there appeared the old woman who had talked to Jack. She told him that she was really a fairy and that it was she who had made Jack take the magic beans just in exchange for a cow. She had wanted him to climb the beanstalk and she had led him to the giant's castle. "Your troubles are now over," the fairy told Jack and his mother. "You will never be poor again and you will be happy as long as you shall live." And so it was that Jack and his mother lived happily ever after. So another classic Ladybird tale, this time Jack and the Beanstalk. But that's enough for today for Story Time with Captain Dan. I hope you enjoyed that classic tale. There are many more to come. Please send in any requests or any shout outs and Captain Dan will do his best to tell the tale. But I think it's best that I wish you good night. So sail safely, shipmates, and sleep well in your hammocks. And I wish you a good night. So good night, good night. I think you might know it by now. Can you say it back to me? Oh, sweet repose. Don't lie on your belly because you might just squash your